Starting with the skirt, it's 2 rectangles cut to whatever length you wish it to be, and the width of the skirt is how far it will fall down on your leg. And I'm sewing the 2 rectangles together with 2 side seams, one of which will have an invisible zipper sewn in. So that's what I'm doing here, and I'm just closing up the bottom of this seam where the zipper ends, just to finish that seam off. And so here's the completed zipper seam on one side of the skirt, and on the other side is just a regular straight stitch for the other side seam. Now I'm going to pleat down this giant loop of fabric, and each pleat takes up around 1 inch of material, but make sure to do a test fitting on yours and experiment just to make sure that it does fit your waist measurement. So basically just pleat down the entirety of the skirt until it fits your waist. Make sure to try it on before you sew the pleats down. Moving on to the waistband of the skirt, so I've cut a long strip of fabric and I'm matching up the raw edges together and then sewing that the whole way around the skirt. And then I'm going to fold over the raw edge of the waistband and fold it over the pleating stitching and top stitch the waistband into place. So now we have something that resembles a skirt, and now I'm going to cut it into the same shape that the skirt is in the movie. And I'm wearing the skirt while I do this, so I know exactly how the pleats will fall and how it should look on myself. And the final step to finish the skirt is to dye the tips with brown fabric dye. And here is the final result for the skirt. For the armour, I used 5mm thick EVA foam from eBay, and I roughly cut out a front shape and a back shape based on my body measurements. I then used heat to start moulding the front piece to my body shape. I also hot glued the back pieces to the sides of the front piece and inserted a corset closure in the back with hot glue as well. Then with 2 or 3mm thick foam, I started adding details to the armour, as you can see here, and I just roughly cut out shapes and started gluing them down with hot glue. It's also good to use reference images when you're doing the details of the armour. Here is the inside of the armour, and the white fabric is calico material that connects all the way around. And here's the front of the armour, and you can see all of the detail that's stuck on with the 2 or 3mm foam. So here I've got reinforcement fabric, which is hot glued to the sides just to make sure that the EVA foam doesn't split open at the side seams. And I've also cut out this panel of the 2 or 3mm thick foam, which extends over the back of the lacing when the armour is worn. And that will just velcro into place there. Now I'm just adding additional details to the armour, and this is out of the 2 or 3mm thick foam, and I just cut it out with a utility knife and then hot glue everything down. Moving on to paint, I started obviously with gold paint, and I did about 3 layers of gold paint before moving on to the other painted details. I also painted these little sequins, and these sequins were originally like a really bright yellow gold, and I just painted them with a mixture of gold and brown paint to make them look a little bit less new. Now you can see me working on the detail on the armour, and I'm just using a light brown to paint all those little strokes, and then once those have dried, I'm using a darker brown paint and going over them to add more dimension. I also went in with a sheer layer of brown paint to make the gold less stark and make everything harmonize a little bit better. And here is the completed paint job of the armor. Also, these are the little sequins I was talking about, and what I did with these was just hot glued them to any of the areas where they were visible on the costume from the movie. So these act as studs, but they're actually fake studs. Finally, just a little demo of the back closure. So you can see that the laces are hidden with the back panel of that foam, and that foam just velcros into place, and then you've got the fake studs to make it look like it's not velcroed into place. And here are just some images of the front and back of the armor, and also that back strap on my right is velcroed into place. For the sandals, I didn't actually get to film the process of making them entirely, since I made these first and it was before I decided that I actually wanted to film the process of making this whole costume. So I'm going to try my best to walk you through how I got up to this stage with the sandals. So I've cut out a front piece out of two different fabrics, one of which is this black vinyl material. And I've also cut it out of this brown fake leather material, which is cut out of an old bag that I had and didn't want anymore. So the black vinyl is cut out a little larger than the brown bag material, and I've also folded over the edges of the black vinyl and then sewn those edges down, so from the front all of the edges have a nice clean finish. And then on top of that, I sewed down the brown bag material, and I've allowed the black vinyl to peek through just a little bit. For the back piece of the sandals, it's also made out of the black vinyl material that I showed you before, but it's got a layer of stiffened felt to give it some rigidity and some stiffness so it doesn't flop about. And this is sewn into place. I believe it's glued first and then the edges were sewn down. So you can see up close that the edges have been folded over and then stitched into place so the felt does not move. And that also gives the back of the shoes a nice finish. Moving on to the straps, they're also made out of the same black vinyl material, and they're threaded through the slits of the front panel of the sandal, and that one there is sewn in, as well as this one that goes over my foot. And the one on my foot also has elastic sewn to the strap, and that's so it can go over my foot or my shoe when I'm wearing it. Now for a quick demo of how I made the straps. Basically just cut out a strip of fabric like this, and then fold in the outer edges so they meet in the center, and then just straight stitch them either side, and then that's your strap done. So here's a completed strap. So you can see that the stitching on either side is there, and then if I flip it over, you can see that the edges meet in the center on the back side of the strap. Now I'll just give you an overview of the sandal contraption so you can see all the details in all their glory for yourself in case you want to make it. One more thing, I've sewn these rectangles on the back panel of the sandals, and that's to keep those black straps in place. I've also got little markings here, and that shows me where the Velcro will be placed, and the Velcro is the closure for these sandals. So here I've got some Velcro positioned on the strap, and I'm just sewing a rectangle around the Velcro to keep that Velcro in place. And then I've also sewn the other side of the Velcro, and that's just going to attach like so. And I've also, on the completed shoes, stuck those little studs right there. And just a quick demo of how these sandals fit with my shoes. And don't mind the socks, I'll be wearing other little slippers with my shoes. Moving on to painting, I'm using brown acrylic paint and just making them look really muddy and dirty, and also a bit more like leather. And same thing for the shoes. And this is what I was talking about when I meant I'd have other slippers to wear with my shoes. And these are canvas ballet flats from eBay. I just painted them and also cut off the elastic that goes over the front of my foot. And here are the completed shoes, except they don't have studs on at this point, but they do in this clip. Now on to the final part of the costume, which are the braces and hand wraps. So for this I did use a pattern which I purchased on Etsy. I'll try and find the link and put it in the description box below. So this is made out of 3mm thick EVA foam, I believe. And yeah, just cutting out the pattern pieces and then scoring them as needed. I do want to mention that the braces that you're seeing me make here are not the actual braces that I wore in the final shots of the costume, and that's because my sister had made better braces that looked more realistic than mine. But I'm leaving the clips in here because you can see the same paint job that we both did to achieve that armor look. The only difference is that her grooves of her braces were not as deep or as thick as mine, and she did not paint the insides of them black like I'm doing here. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of how I did the closures for the braces, but basically it's that same black vinyl material that you saw for the sandals, and sewn those the same way I did the straps and velcroed those onto the braces so they would velcro into place with hot glue, and I also put fake studs on those as well. Here are the hand wraps, and this is just made out of old skirt fabric, and I also painted it brown, but I didn't get any footage of that either. Here are the finished braces and hand wraps. The hand wraps are wrapped into position and then safety pinned into place. And that's it, the costume is done.